Hi folks, my name is Jim Cardos. Thanks for stopping by here. You're here because of my pronounced tinnitus treatment, no doubt. I wanted to share with you my story of how I went through tinnitus because I think it has wide range applications for everyone. It's been over 20 years since I had tinnitus. I'd like to describe how I got there, but I also want to give a sense of hope and relief and empowerment because what I had figured out through the help of others, no doubt, you can do for yourself. This is an absolute, I don't say it's foolproof, but this absolutely will work. Absolutely will work. It's not even a question about it. It is absolutely based on biology. My piece to this, I'm not a doctor. I was a helicopter pilot for many years in the service. That's what kind of led me to the tinnitus. But the science behind it is clear and impactful. I ask that you listen to this. Please don't try to pick out little things that I may say that be incorrect with current scholarship on this. But what led me to this was based on scholarship back 20 years ago. And again, as I've looked at some of the tinnitus websites, I just haven't seen it out there. People are still dealing with this as an auditory problem or auditory problem, excuse me. But truly, this is an anxiety problem. And let's see if we can kind of recreate this and go back. By the way, please feel free to leave comments. Hey, you didn't address this, or I've found this. Be a wonderful piece. I'm not suggesting that necessarily we can start a discussion in the comments section. If you can, that's great. But this is a first go, so take it easy on me as we go through this. And let me share this. And I'll leave my contact information. Feel free to send me an email, and I'll do my best to respond to you. Okay, and again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist. I'm going to suggest that you go to them. But let's kind of work through this and see what it is. And I want to give you the sense your body is not malfunctioning if you have tinnitus. It's quite the opposite. It's hyperfunctioning. When you truly see that your body's not, failing to work, it's working overtime, and we kind of have to throttle it back a little. There's certain things we can do. Here's the operative piece. You've got yourself into this through various pieces, not the hearing loss that's caused it, but tinnitus itself has gotten you. You've gotten yourself into this, but you can get yourself out of it permanently. Okay, and it's like that house on the side of the road that you've never noticed before. Once you see it, you'll never not notice it again. So once you cure for this, you're not going to worry about relapsing. There's a larger piece to anxiety attacks. It works the same kind of thought process here, because we worry about that. Well, what if it works now if it doesn't work later? Your understanding of this can never be reverted. Once you get this, you'll have it forever. So let's step through this real quick. My story, I was a 28-year-old helicopter pilot in the Marine Corps. I had seen a few people get killed in training accidents. I was taking care of my one friend's son, who was 7 at the time. He's now 40, and adopted kind of a big brother role for him. And I was taking care of my friend's wife who died. And I felt like my world was working on a suicide hotline. I was praying to God, don't worry about me, take care of others. But really, I needed the help. I was taking too much on my shoulders, and I collapsed through it. Chronic stress led to anxiety. Chronic anxiety led to panic disorder, which is a brutal thing. I don't wish that on anyone. And I talk to anyone that I've ever heard of, my little world that's gone through that, and I try to help them get through that, because you can get through that permanently as well. And you can see there's a tapestry here, these pieces all interlay. But fortunately, this was before the internet really took off. It's about 1987, so I was out there kind of dealing with this panic disorder piece really on my own. I mean, I try to reach out to therapists, because they hadn't experienced it, and there wasn't really a deep understanding, I think, of the mechanics of anxiety disorder. I didn't find it was a ton of help until I stumbled on the works of Dr. Claire Weeks, and I'll post that in there too. Claire Weeks was I think she was a general practitioner in Australia in the 60s. She self-diagnosed these panic attacks and was able to get through them herself, and then published a couple of works. Peace from Nervous Suffering, I believe, and More Peace from Nervous Suffering. And it was a seminal work in my life. It changed my life around. And I was able to work through the anxiety pieces even while I was still flying, so that was kind of an issue, but was able to work through it. And fast forward, so I got through that panic piece. Then 10 years later, fast forward 10 years later, I was having a little anxiety in my life, not a big deal, but I was starting to hear ringing, and the ringing became more pronounced. Now, as a kid, my friend's mom had tinnitus, and he described this tinnitus, and I thought, oh my goodness. I said, you have this hearing loss, and you can never escape it. This ringing is in your ears. I thought, wow, that sounds really bad, the things you can have. And that kind of stuck with me. So here I have this tinnitus. It's waking me up in the middle of the night. I hear this ringing. And I decided to go to a ear, nose, and throat specialist, an otolaryngologist. And now hear what the description of what I had, what he had given to me. He said, you have a low-grade hearing loss, no doubt. And I knew that from being on the flight line for 17 years. And he said, you have tinnitus. You're always going to have tinnitus. My wife has tinnitus. Can't outrun it, can't escape it. You can mask it. And here's a pamphlet for a support group. And when I reflected back on his prescription and his description of it, was very emotive, like very, boom, this is the sentence, you've got it, you can't run from it, very kind of, harsh. And then I started thinking back. I said, getting this tinnitus is interesting. At the same time, I'm getting these anxiety feelings. They're comorbid. They're happening together. Something has got to be there. Where there's smoke, there's fire. Why am I getting this in the same time? And then it thought on, and I really had looked deeply into anxiety all the time that I'd gone through that 10 years prior to this. And it dawned on me that that these two must be together. What he was saying was emotionally based. Then it dawned on me, so as I understood tinnitus, your ears are trying to hear, and basically you're hearing your ears trying to hear. So we who have hearing loss, I remember the folks in Star Trek, Leonard Nimoy and William Shatner had it from an explosive event. But we who have hearing loss, we can hear our ears trying to hear. That's how tinnitus was described to me. So we hear this ringing. And then it dawned on me, I'm like, well, if my eyes opened up, and I open my eyes, and I'm seeing, do I get annoyed that my eyes are trying to see? Isn't there kind of an annoyance factor? And annoyance is emotive based, right? So why am I worried about this hearing piece? Well, then it kind of got me thinking, you know what? This sounds like an anxiety piece. It definitely does. And what am I talking with the anxiety piece? We teach ourselves to fear certain things. Some are intrinsic, some we learn. We learn to fear spiders. Spiders are infinitesimally small. When we walk to them, we look like giant apartment complexes ready to step on them. But some of us, when we see spiders, we're ready to run away, even though the biggest spiders really can't do anything dramatic to you but get you sick for a little while, right? But you're massive compared to a spider, but you have an irrational response. First piece is, we don't always think intellectually. We don't always, we're not always coming from just a fact-based modality or a left brain kind of modality. That fear piece is there at all times, keeping us safe. But the fear piece is unreasoning. You could fear aliens coming down or some other idiotic thought. Not that extraterrestrial life is idiotic, but aliens like, in your schools or something. And that doesn't make sense, right? Your intellectual brain's like, nah, I'm not believing that. But the fear guy in your mind, and when I talk to kids, I talk about this. Like, the fear guy's there ready to help you, but he's an idiot. He can't think. I shouldn't say idiot, but he doesn't have a brain, but he wants to help you. He's there to help. Your limbic system, where this emanates from, is there to help. So if you had this, so think about the spider thing. If you had this tinnitus and you have this low-grade hearing loss and you can hear this ringing, but the ringing started to annoy you, your limbic system guy, and then seasoned in there is your parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, basically your body's defenses. The limbic system guy right there with your intellect is saying, hey, I can help with this. Let me take care of this. Why don't you're training me, by the way, brain, you're training me, the limbic system here, to fear this thing because you don't like it. If you don't like it, I want to be up a guard against it, just like a lion, tiger, or bear. So I'm going to store it. I'm going to store it, and when it comes, I'm going to be looking for it. When it comes, maybe I'll put a little dose of adrenaline in there just to kind of get ready to fear, for run. Remember that fear, freeze, or flight piece? I'm going to get you ready for it, and I'm going to just jump out, or do whatever we need to do. I'm going to get on guard for it. Now, if we think about it, those fears, lions, tigers, and bears, you hear a bear, it's going to be a tiger and if you're living where tigers are and you're India, something in the subcontinent, and you're just trying to roar, you can't really think of that intellectually. Yeah, it's a tiger, probably need to run, get the family, and by that time it's all two ladies in the tent, and you've got something, Jungle Bookish going on here. Same thing with stepping off a curb. That's something that we've learned. Like we weren't primordial raised with car horns for automobiles, but the second you step off the curb and you hear a car horn, you're back on. Why? Because it didn't go through your intellectual brain. It went through a deeper process that was immediate, bam, right away. And that's the process that can get the adrenaline. We need that right now. We have to do something right now. Well, that's where you and I, of so many things, not just spiders, not just the fear of leaving the house, all these different things, that's where we embedded the sound. It's called, one of the pieces is hyperacusis. It means we can hear things louder than others. Why? Because our limbic system is attended to it. Okay, your fortress, you built a fortress around yourself. You're not malfunctioning, you're hyperfunctioning. That fear guy is ready, he's ready to go. Your limbic system, hey dude, what do we got here? Is it one of those kind of automatic things? I need to dump a little kerosene or adrenaline in? Or what do I need to do? Your cognitive brain got you here, or your intellectual brain, it can get you out of it. You put that lion, tiger, bear with hyperacusis, stepping off the curb, the spider. It's not rational to fear spiders. They don't offer any tremendous threat. They don't. They're scared out of their minds trying to get away from us, but yet we'll move, we'll move away from them. So this interplay between your intellectual brain and your limbic brain, if you will, which is trying to keep you alive, right? Got to stay alive. You've trained it. Now we're going to untrain it. We're going to retrain it, if you will. Okay, so that's where you put that sound of tinnitus. So it's not an auditory thing. It's the response to the auditory piece. It's not you listening, the fact that you can hear yourself try to hear, just like it's not, you don't have a panic disorder when you see things, right? That's you trying to see. It's your response. It's that anxiety and limbic response. You stuck that sound into that repository where the lions and tigers and bears are, and incy-beansy spiders. And now, when your body and it's listening, this guy's ready to help. He's there to help. He's not there to hurt. He's there to help. This fear brain. If you've seen Inside Out, I think by Disney, it's a great piece of that. How you have these people, the fear, disgust, sadness, and joy kind of operating the brain. And joy is always trying to take controls and doesn't want sadness, but finally realizes the sadness is a part. That's where fear is, and anger is there too. Fear is part of your thought process. So let's go a little deeper into that anxiety piece. When you have an anxiety response, here comes Mr. Fear Brain, right? He's got his his solution is, right, the fire hose of adrenaline. Dude, I got some adrenaline. I'll get you set up. And adrenaline is a tremendously powerful piece. You're not going, people think they have anxiety attacks and they're thinking all these crazy thoughts. You're not going crazy. And what you do in anxiety attacks is what if. If you hear a what if in your mind, throw it out. It's valueless. It's your fear brain just trying to figure out every eventuality, but it doesn't have the cognitive capacity to weigh these things out. What if a safe drops on my head like Wile E. Coyote? What if, some other crazy thing happens? Your intellectual brain is better for that. The fear brain is just trying to protect you, right? So getting back to the tinnitus piece. So when that adrenaline gets pumped into us, I liken it to a computer. If you plug it into 110 volt, and I use this with kids. The kids I've talked about that. When you plug it into a 110 volt plug in your house, it's fine, works great. If you threw it into the 220, your computer would be giving you all sorts of crazy stuff on the screen. Doesn't mean the computer doesn't work anymore. It just means you get too much power going into it. That's your brain on adrenaline. So when you have this type of anxiety or panic response, which is what tinnitus has become or is, it has all sorts of things. You get that hyperacusis. You can hear this thing like a freight train, right? All this sound in your brain, and it makes you feel fearful, right? So what is the cure to this thing? What's the piece of it? Well, because I had these comorbid things, I was having an anxiety piece, and then this tinnitus thing came out. I decided to look it up. This is again back in 1997, and I came across a gentleman who I thanked for curing me of this. I had the sense of what it was, and he was right on. His name is Dr. Pawel Jastreboff, Jastroboff, and he developed tinnitus retraining therapy. And basically what he looked at was not the auditory piece, the fact that you can hear yourself hearing. Okay, that's natural. I think everyone, if I remember this correctly, in a noise-proof room will hear ringing. They'll hear themselves trying to hear. It wasn't that piece. He was focusing on the anxiety response. Okay, so read his stuff, Dr. Pawel Jastreboff, or Pawel, Pawel. And I think he was at the University of Maryland at one point, might have been Johns Hopkins, somewhere in Maryland. And that was, again, 20 years ago. But I see his stuff is still on the web. I definitely suggest it. So here is one more thing about the hyperacusis thing, and then we'll talk about how to fix this. If you've ever been stressed, let's say you're in a car, you're listening to music loud, but all of a sudden there's a driving incident, and somebody cuts in front of you, or somebody's riding your, your back bumper. Notice how the music sounds very loud at that point. It didn't sound loud before, but now it's loud. It's turned the music down, and your body's starting to ramp up in a fear response, right? You're starting to ramp up in that fight or flight. You probably just got a very teensy bit of adrenaline. Your body's becoming more aware, right? Your body's going to protect you and know, what do we have to do? Do we flee, fight, flight, or freeze? What do we do here? So that's hyperacusis. Your body is kind of, for whatever reason, it's an anxiety response, is now hearing so well. Well, how do we get that down? Simply don't be annoyed. When you have that tinnitus piece, breathe, deep breaths, right? You know what deep breaths can do to you, how they can stabilize you. It's a metabolic response. It's clear, and it happens immediately. Deep breaths, calm down, relax, let this thing come. This is Dr. Week's piece. Whenever you have an anxiety piece coming on, just relax, let it come. Don't fight it. You have to learn this in panic attack piece, because it's the fighting of it that kicks more adrenaline, makes it worse. It's this cycling. It's horrible. Same thing here with our tinnitus. See the fact that your body's not malfunctioning, it's hyperfunctioning. This doesn't have to be a permanent situation. Your body just learned, hey, fear this sound of my ears hearing. And until otherwise noted, because remember, that fear guy just wants to help. He's doing his deal, but he can't think, he can't reason. He needs the intellect to help him here. Just realize, retrain your brain to get this out of the lion and tiger and bear mentality. Just like you not have to crazy fear spiders who can do nothing to you. You can do this with tinnitus. So relax, learn to relax. Let this thing come. Don't fear it. It can't hurt you. It's annoying as hell, don't get me wrong. We know it is, right? But it can't fear it. It can't hurt you, just like panic attacks, as horrible as they are. And I don't ever wish you get those. But they physically can't hurt you. You need to let those come and retrain your brain to get these pieces out of your limbic system. Leave the lions and tigers and bear and car horns in there. Those things can truly hurt you, but the sound of yourself hearing can't hurt you. So you need to retrain yourself. Just read the piece on Dr. Jastreboff. I'll post it under this. But don't be, when it comes, let it come. Don't try to run from it. Don't try to, and do this a little over time, right? Just if we want to get used to spiders, maybe you've seen this. I keep using the spider piece. That people who had a horrible fear of spiders, how tarantulas crawling all over the body and sitting on their head and, playing with them. It's a little at a time, right? So let that just have the understanding is huge. See it for what it is. You're annoyed at this thing. It's not any life-threatening piece. It's just a horrible annoyance. Well, that's emotional. That's not cognitive. It's emotional. This is part of the emotive system. All right, so that's where this solve is going to be. You put it in there in the lions and tigers and bear. You can take it out. You can. Don't need a ton of therapy. By the way, this is not a response to anything that's happened in your past childhood. The stress which led to anxiety, which led to chronic anxiety, which led to maybe some panic disorder. Yes, once you get in that piece, that you may have some initiating event, but you can cure yourself of these things because this is an absolute physiological piece, right? The unresolved piece in your childhood or this traumatic event can be dealt with on its own. You don't have to have a concurrent anxiety response or tinnitus or whatever the initiating event. They're not dependent, my point is. So in other words, you don't have to go back and solve this to cure this. You can cure this because you got yourself into this point by itself. And think also about the stress. Remember reading, David Hackworth's piece about being in Vietnam. It's called About Face. And he talked about some people get battle or be stressed in battle, which of course is horrific. He said when they got to the level where they were just so stressed, he said they were almost useless. You just had to, in terms of being able to operate, you had to get them out. You had to get them, some R&R, some resting relaxation, and just kind of let the stress kind of seep on out. And that's what you're going to do here over time. So a little at a time, but don't see this thing as some horrific thing that you have to fear. You don't. See it as, embrace it. Hey, I like this noise. My ears can hear. Hey, that's fantastic. My eyes can see. I'm blessed to be able to have this. Don't see this this all of a sudden this loud noise coming as a negative. See it as a positive, because your body is certainly responding in a positive way. You're not malfunctioning. You're hyperfunctioning. You're not getting it wrong. You're getting it too right. Your body stepped up and is taking care of you. Okay, body, we don't need this sound here. Let's start retraining you. I don't want you to fear this anymore. Your limbic system will hear you. Even though it doesn't understand it, it'll realize that it's not a threat. This noise is not a threat. And what's going to happen is your body's going to start standing down, right? The fortress is going to start standing down. And eventually, you're not going to hear this thing quite as loud anymore. Why? Because your body is learning. Don't give me that adrenaline response when I see this thing. It is not a threat. Same thing with the spiders, right? A little over time to eventually it won't be a threat at all. And you won't go back to this. Why? Because you'll realize that your limbic system has experienced, your intellectual part of your brain has experienced this. You're not going to go back and have this relapse. And sometimes you have an anxiety state, but you're going to recognize it. You're not going to fear it. Your understanding is huge to this. It's the house on the side of the road. Once you see it, you'll never unsee it. You'll never go past it and not know it's there. Once you retrain yourself to get off of this, you'll be cleared, for